What if I told you you could paint 4 completely different sky scenes in 3 colors without any reference photo? Today, I'm going to show you how to paint wispy cirrus clouds, atmospheric overcast skies, dramatic thunderheads, all using simple techniques like wet into wet blending and backwashes to make your clouds look natural. These techniques are quick and forgiving, perfect for practicing your clouds without a drawing. Plus, I'll show you how to adjust a dried watercolor to improve it. So let's dive into these simple sky techniques you can master in minutes. The colors I'm going to use today are cobalt blue, manganese blue hue, and burnt sienna. Not all of these examples will use all of these colors, but these are going to be the ones I'll primarily use today. I've prepared a palette with cobalt blue, manganese blue hue, and burnt sienna. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to add some water and then mix some puddles that I can use. The brushes that I'm going to use today are a sable brush, and this is a size 12. I might also step down to the size 6 if I need to. But I have a secret brush that I like to use, and it's this. It's just a chip brush that you can buy from Lowe's. Because the bristles are irregular, you can get random shapes that are much like nature. This is a Baohong watercolor block, cold press, 15 by 11 inches. I've mixed up my colors and I'm ready to go. I'm going to apply some water first so I can get some blending, but I'm not going to make the entire section wet. Alright, so now I'm going to apply a little bit of water, and that will allow me to get some blending. I don't know if you can see this or not, but I've got these, I'm leaving some of this paper white so you can get an effect of wispy clouds. And you could do it all in just one color. You could do it either in the cobalt blue or you could use the manganese blue hue. I like to use both because the sky is not just one color blue. I'm going to assume that my light source is on the left hand side, so I will use the cobalt blue from right to left. Because my paper is wet, it's starting to blend, which is nice. Blend into the wet paper. And maybe these aren't cirrus clouds. I'm not a meteorologist, so I'm not exactly sure. And I like to combine the manganese blue hue with the cobalt blue to give the idea that there's warmer light over here from where the sun comes from. Now I'm imagining that I'm working towards the horizon. You can see some streakiness, which is okay. It's okay. But what I'll do is tilt that a little bit, and then you can see that goes away. Now this could be water, it could be land, or I could take it all the way down. I'll just do a little, well, my palette's in the way, pardon me while I move it. Just a little dry brush effect here. And this is not part of the sky, this is just part of the painting to make it look like an actual composition. And if you want to know more about dry brush techniques, check out this video. So as I said, this is 6 by 4. If you're working in a larger size, you still could do it fairly quickly. So as you saw, that really didn't take more than a minute or two to do that. Now for the secret weapon. I've just dipped the tip of the bristles in water. And I'm assuming that you can't see this very well. Maybe you can hear me brush it on. And I have to change my head's position so I can, move my head around so I can see what I've done. And then I put both colors on the bristles. So I have cobalt blue here and manganese blue hue here, and it'll blend as I apply it. And really I didn't need to pre-wet the paper when you think about it, because these bristles are, there's gaps. And cirrus clouds, now that I think about it, I think they're sort of bulbous a little bit. I mean, a little cotton ball-y. I'm going to increase the value here so it looks like the horizon is lighter, which it should be. So a little bit more paint to make it darker. And I just dropped in some water, and what that'll do is that will cause a backwash, and that can be really pretty too when you want them. Because these are cheap, you'll lose bristles. I'm going to put a little bit more pigment here on the edge so it looks complete. It looks like I just didn't come all the way up to the edge. It makes it look a little incomplete. And that's darker than I want, but we can fix that. I'm going to take a damp brush and lift that color. I want the color to meet the tape, but then because it's still wet, I can work with that color, but it will dry lighter. If I wanted to, I also could lift. See how that's just starting to dry, and I can come in and dab out what I think might be shapes of clouds. The trick course here is that the brush needs to be less wet than the pigment on the paper. I used to think that lifting was when you goofed up and you had to sort of compensate for that, but it's an actual technique. I saw a painting demonstration one time where somebody planned their painting. It was floral, and part of the process was to lay down darker pigment and then come back and lift, and it was his plan. So I've spent a little more time on this one than the other, just to show some of the techniques you can use, some of the effects you can get. Trying to make it look random. It's hard to do. The nice thing about these kinds of simple skies is that they're really quick. You don't have to pre-mix your colors in your palette. You don't need a drawing. You don't need a reference photo, though you could use one. There's no layering needed. And I mean, to me, best of all, I only need 2 colors and they blend beautifully on the page. The first thing I'm going to do is mix up some gray. And I'll need a lot more than what I just made. And it needs to be sort of a blue gray. I mean, I'll have some that's more of a warm gray because I'll probably drop some colors directly into the cloud. So that's pretty gray. I think I want to add a little more cobalt to that. And it's pretty dark. I might need to lighten that up. So again, I'm going to work wet and wet, and I'm going to try to put some water down where the water isn't touching each other, so there's a little separation. And I don't want to put pigment everywhere as well. So I'm going to start with the manganese blue hue and drop that in. And I'm tilting my head so I can see where it's going. And here I want the edge to be soft, so I'm coming back with a damp brush to let that blend into white. Now I'm going to come in with a little bit of cobalt and mix that in. And I can even come here and I'll get a little bit of a hard edge in that part of the sky. And I need to be careful that I leave white because the way I've got this right now, there's very little clouds here, but I want there to be a suggestion of clouds. In fact, I'm gonna just put a little bit of gray in there to try to suggest clouds. And a little more gray here. Again, being random is the trick. And when it works, it looks really neat. A little bit of cobalt here. Because that's what's tricky about the gray in clouds, is that it's not a pure gray. This is one of the reasons why I really like using burnt sienna in my gray mixture, is that when it dries, sometimes it separates and it gives you this kind of nondescript warmth that's just hard to describe. See how I'm dipping with my brush to try to soften that edge? I like what's happening here. See how that's sort of blending into the white and looking kind of wispy and ethereal? So I've got some water here, but I want to leave some white because it's clouds. And more gray. I think this is sort of standing out on its own. I'm not real crazy about that. So I'm going to drop in more gray so it's not all by itself, and help unify the painting a little bit. It's pretty wet, so it should blend on its own. Now I'm going to make that gray just a little bluer. See if I can get it to go this direction a little bit. So this is definitely more tricky than what I just showed you, but it can be really pretty. I think I'll just suggest a little more plain sky, but I want to keep it light because, again, I'm imagining that the light source is on the left. And blend that down so there's a little bit of a gradient like you'd see towards the horizon. Alright, now I'm fiddling. But I think that's okay. When it's skies, they're pretty forgiving. Now what I'd like to do is I'm going to look and see. So this is starting to dry. I'm going to take a little drop of water and see if I can't get a backwash, because that can be a really neat effect. Ooh, that's working, that's working. That can give you some of those crisp edges. So we have soft edges and crisp edges. Let's see, and this is a puddle here, so I'm going to lift that. And I see another place that it might be too wet. Let me try it anyway. Right here. Yeah, I don't think that did anything. This is where understanding the dampness of your paper is part of the expertise that you get over time with practice and really looking at. I haven't shown you shots of me tilting my head so I can get the light to reflect off of the water. Now see how I put that water in here and how it's migrating and pushing the pigment, and so we'll get sort of a sharp edge. I was hoping to do that on one of these, although I do have sharp edges there, it's just they're small. So I'm going to try one here because it's starting to dry. And that'll make it a little bit bigger part of the cloud. Oh yeah, look at it go, look at it go. This is why working on small pieces of paper is good. If it works and you want to put a little bit of land or water in the bottom, you could even make it a greeting card. I wish I could get another effect like that so I have more of this pattern elsewhere in this demo, and I think I'm just going to go for it over here. I'm going to try one here and see. Now that might be too dry. Good for you to see that. So what's happening is I put down the water and it's so dry that it's just sitting on the surface. It's not moving, it's not blending. Well, actually is a little blending here. It met that other blossom as one of the nicknames of this backwash technique. So it is doing a little something. Okay, this is starting to dry in here. I put water down just a few minutes ago and it didn't do anything. So I'm going to try here instead. And boy, I used to hate blossoms. Well, the reason is that I wanted to be able to do a perfectly clear blue sky, which will be in the next sky video. And gradients can be challenging. I mean, I still find them somewhat challenging. There are things you can do to actually make them work out. But I would get one little unevenness, one little drop of water, or my brush would be wetter on a second stroke than an earlier stroke, and it would just not work out, and I would get so frustrated. But lately I've learned how to use backwashes to get these interesting effects in clouds and water, and this is one example. So this is not doing what I want it to do. It's wet, but it's not super wet. I might have to just wait. Oh, patience. Who wants to be patient? We want our paintings to be masterpieces in 10 minutes. This next one is going to be a thunderhead before the storm starts. So it's a summer day and you can see the clouds building against a deep blue sky. And there's some drama building, but it hasn't happened yet. I'm going to do that, and I'm going to try some techniques to, again, get some hard edges and some soft edges, again, without drawing. I'm going to start with manganese blue hue and just try to be random. And that can be challenging. So if you can imagine, or I'm trying to imagine, that there's the shape of the cloud and you have all these like cotton ball shapes. And when it's earlier in the day, the clouds can look very, very sharp on the edges, for, crisp is what the word I used earlier. Oh, looky, I just splashed into my other painting. Well, we'll see what that does. That could be an interesting technique. Now you have a couple of options here. You know that there's not just one cloud in the sky. So I'm going to do a little blotting here, and that's going to suggest some more distant clouds. Now it's very wet, so you can see that I blotted and then the pigment just ran back into it. So again, being random is part of the challenge here. So I'm going to stop that part. Now I want to put a little bit of gray into this large cloud here, and I'm going to try to not be precise. I'm going to put water in, and you can see I touched some of the edges. Now some of it's already dry. Get some of those edges. So we have some softness in some places. Now this will dry lighter, but as with this painting, I'm trying to get some crisp edges, because you'll see that in a summertime thunderhead, and some soft edges. And And then towards the bottom, they have a very distinct bottom to these clouds. I'm going to fade this out just a little bit. It feels like I need to come in with a little more color here. I'm going to blue that up a little bit. Wow, that's really blue. And I think I'm just going to leave that. I mean, I'm not going to put light blue here. I could, but it would be very, very pale because we're so close to the horizon. Okay, now's the time for dropping in. Well, it's not quite time. I want it to be time. It's not quite dry enough. Now I did get some backwashes here that I didn't intend. If I like them, they're happy accidents. If I don't like them, they're mistakes. And that has a hard edge I don't like, so I'm going to try to just blend that out a little bit. And these, I'm coming in with a damp brush, what I think is a damp brush. And lifting that color. Since it's already trying to push the color, I'm going to try to push it even more. To try to get that pigment to push out towards this edge. And as I am blending that, some of that water may come back and cause other backwashes this way, which again might be really neat. Okay, now I see some other opportunities for backwashes. By the way, in case you are wondering, this is called a kayak brush. They are no longer made. These are the only sable rounds I have, and they're good. So if you want to buy them, I don't think you can. So I don't try to show these in my videos because I figure people say, hey, those are neat, I want some. Yeah, I can't buy them anymore, sorry. Backwashes, if you can learn to control them, can help the painting paint itself. I don't know if you can see this on video, but I can see how I'm dabbing the droplets of water, and it really is pushing the pigment around. I'm going to try something. I'm going to try dabbing these a little bit. Yeah, I think I like that a little bit better. This backwash on this painting is the only one in this particular painting, and that makes it appear unbalanced to me. So I'm going to attempt to soften it so that I get more unity in this painting. And this is just a damp brush, and you can see how it's picking up those sharp edges. And now I have a softer effect. Because the painting is completely dry, this will work. It's always nice to know ways that you can fix a watercolor painting. But it's a myth that you can't fix mistakes in watercolor paintings. Now, I have had watercolor paintings that really were a fail. I mean, there were parts I liked, but overall were a fail. That happens. That's part of the learning process, and it still happens today. But this is nice. So now that backwash is reduced. You still see some of the effect, but I feel that this is much more balanced than it was. I'm going to do something similar on this painting here. When I touched the edges of the cloud here to the sky, I wanted some blending, but it made me lose the shape of the cloud. This one might be harder to fix, but I'm going to try. Here's where understanding your pigments can help. This will not work as well with a staining pigment. These I like. And I'm thinking also how I can make the shape of the cloud look a little bit. So the cloud was supposed to have been shaped like this, but I've lost that. So I'm going to take a little bit of manganese blue hue, which is off camera, and come in here and try to reestablish the shape of that cloud. Now it's a little bit wet where I just did some lifting. Just a little bit more. And I will get some hard edges, but they won't be as hard as if I had done a backwash. Now I'm going to wet this here because I'm trying to blend the colors a little bit. And another trick is if you keep pulling your pigment away from where you were working, eventually you'll have a dry brush effect, and it'll trick the eye. It'll think that, although I'm going to wet this here, I'm going to put a little bit more cobalt because it's too light. I'm not getting the contrast and drama that I was looking for. Now it's kind of wet. And this is a little bit drier, so I'm running the risk of a backwash. The way to get around that is to go over it entirely. I'm going to use a real thin pigment, and these are going to blend a little bit, but go over it entirely. And then that way I won't get backwashes that I'm not looking for. Because now the wetness is even across the paper. Now there's a light area here, and I can just add some more pigment there. Because it's wet, I can get away with this. I wanted to share with you another trick. Looking at this painting here that I did with the chip brush, I was expecting this area to turn out a lot wider than it did. Here's something else you can do if you want to remove pigment after it's dry. This, let me put it down here so it's in focus. This is a piece of a Mr. Clean Magic Eraser. It's the kind without any additives. So what I've done is I've dipped it in my fairly clean water and wrung it out so it's damp. And now I'm going to start rubbing it on the paper, and it will start to pick up the pigment. Now it can be a little aggressive, so watch out for that. But that's a pretty big difference. I'm going to do a little more in the center, and I tear them so I can have control. If you've ever worked with them, here's one that is still partially intact. You can see it's, you know, fairly large. I wouldn't have any control if I tried to work with a piece that size. And that's the other way to fix a watercolor painting.